Justice doesn't always stop at the gavel's strike. It often finds its way into the cold, shadowy corners of prison walls. In this video, we're diving into the chilling tales of 5 notorious killers who didn't escape their own violent fates behind bars. These are the shocking, twisted stories of murderers who met their match inside the very cages meant to contain them. Buckle up, this isn't your typical redemption arc. Picture this: Chicago, May 21st, 1924. The city's about to be rocked by a crime so mind-boggling it'd make any true crime podcast host spill their coffee. Meet Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, 2 young men with brains the size of their egos. Leopold, 19, had just wrapped up his degree at the University of Chicago and was ready to tackle Harvard Law. Loeb, 18, was busy pretending to care about history while actually just wanting to make it. Together, these 2 genius-level troublemakers had one thing in mind: proving they were smarter than everyone else by committing the perfect crime. Inspired by Nietzsche, because of course they were, Leopold and Loeb decided they were supermen, not the cape-wearing kind, but the we're-above-the-law kind. Their goal? Kill someone, purely for kicks. No revenge, no money, just 2 privileged rich kids looking for a high-risk thrill. After months of plotting, they finally picked their victim, 14-year-old Bobby Franks, a distant relative of Loeb. On May 21st, they lured Bobby into their car with the oh-so-trustworthy "Hey kid, want a ride?" tactic. What followed was as chilling as it sounds. The details are a bit murky, but Bobby was murdered in cold blood, his body dumped in a remote area. Leopold and Loeb, feeling pretty smug about their intellectual feat, patted themselves on the back like they had just solved world peace. But wait, plot twist. To throw off the police, they sent a ransom note demanding money for Bobby's safe return. Classic move, right? Except they made one little mistake. Leopold dropped his glasses at the scene, but not just any glasses. These had a hinge so unique that only a handful existed in all of Chicago. The cops traced the glasses straight back to Leopold, and suddenly, their perfect crime started unraveling faster than a kid's science fair project. Under pressure, they cracked and admitted it wasn't about hate or money. It was a sick, twisted brain teaser. The public? Horrified. The media dubbed it the crime of the century, and Chicago couldn't believe that 2 privileged kids would kill an innocent child just to prove they were that smart. The trial? A circus. With the evidence piling up like a skyscraper, their defense attorney, the legendary Clarence Darrow, didn't even bother trying to claim innocence. Instead, he begged for mercy, arguing that Leopold and Loeb were just victims of their privileged upbringing and misguided intellectual ideas. The judge, perhaps feeling generous, sentenced them to life in prison plus 99 years, sparing them the death penalty. The families? They disowned them faster than you could say, "Goodbye, trust fund." Loeb's story ended in 1936 when he was killed in a prison fight. Leopold, on the other hand, became the model inmate. He studied languages, taught other prisoners, and even published scientific papers. After 33 years, he was paroled in 1958, living quietly in Puerto Rico until his death in 1971. The Leopold and Loeb case left America reeling, forcing the public to face uncomfortable truths about privilege and morality. It's even inspired films like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, showing that even a century later, their twisted tale still fascinates and disturbs. So there you have it. 2 kids who thought they were smarter than the world, only to be caught by a pair of glasses. Sometimes, the smartest guys in the room are the ones who make the biggest blunders. On a scorching day in Tucson, Arizona, May 31st, 1964, the city's darkest secret began to unravel, all thanks to a man who was as bizarre as he was dangerous. Meet Charles Schmid, the Pied Piper of Tucson. Standing at a mere 5'3", with a little help from shoe lifts, Schmid had a magnetic charm that drew local teens, especially young girls, to his side. With his dyed black hair and fake mole, he channeled Elvis Presley, but behind that quirky facade was a monster no one saw coming. Born on July 8, 1942, Schmid had a somewhat normal childhood, adopted by Charles and Catherine Schmid, who ran a nursing home. His parents' rocky marriage and eventual divorce left lasting scars, and school wasn't his strong suit, although he excelled in gymnastics. But his senior year was a mess. He quit gymnastics, got expelled for stealing, and drifted aimlessly. With no diploma and no plans, Schmid became a regular on Tucson's Speedway Boulevard, cruising in a car funded by his mom's $300 monthly allowance. Schmid had style, or at least an eccentric version of it. Teens, drawn to his odd confidence, followed him like moths to a flame. But on May 31, 1964, his true nature revealed itself. Schmid, along with his girlfriend Mary French and his friend John Saunders, lured 15-year-old Aline Rowe into a trap. French invited Rowe on a double date, and trusting her new friends, Rowe went along. Once in the desert, Schmid attacked Rowe with a rock, while French stayed in the car, blasting music. Afterward, Schmid and Saunders buried Rowe, sure they'd gotten away with murder. For a while, they did. Teen runaways were common in the 60s, and Rowe's disappearance was dismissed, but Schmid couldn't resist bragging about his crime. His confidant, Richie Bruns, was horrified but too scared to act. Tragically, Rowe wasn't the last. In 1965, Schmid escalated his violence, killing his girlfriend Gretchen Fritz and her 13-year-old sister Wendy when Gretchen threatened to expose him. He buried them in the desert and once again bragged to Bruns. This time, Bruns fled Tucson and contacted the police. With his testimony, authorities arrested Schmid in November 1965. The Pied Piper was finally caught. Convicted in February 1966, Schmid received a death sentence, later reduced to life in prison. In 1975, fellow inmates stabbed Schmid, and after 20 agonizing days, he died on March 30th. Charles Schmid's story is a chilling reminder that even the most charming people can hide the darkest secrets. It's 1977 in Quebec, Canada, the age of disco, bell-bottoms, and apparently a booming market for self-proclaimed prophets. Meet Roche Thériault, a man in his 30s who believed God had handpicked him to save humanity. Raised in a strict religious household, Roche was basically a walking Old Testament encyclopedia. He dropped out of school early, clung tightly to apocalyptic prophecies, and was absolutely convinced the world was gearing up for a divine showdown between good and evil. To prep for this holy smackdown, he joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church, embracing their clean-living lifestyle. No booze, no smokes, no fun. But here's the plot twist. Roche didn't exactly stay on the straight and narrow. Armed with charisma and a silver tongue, Roche began hosting religious seminars that were less about theology and more about recruitment. Before long, he'd amassed a group of devoted followers who quit their jobs, abandoned their families, and joined Roche in forming a commune. He dubbed them the Ant Hill Kids, inspired by their relentless work ethic. Cute, right? At first, life in the commune seemed wholesome. They baked bread, sang songs, and treated Roche like Moses leading them to the promised land. But paradise quickly spiraled into a hellscape. Roche's behavior turned dark. He ditched his clean-living vows, started drinking again, and laid down rules that made the Old Testament stone tablets look like gentle guidelines. Want to talk to your family? Forbidden. Want to chat with each other? Not without Roche's permission. Breaking the rules earned punishments ranging from savage beatings to being strung up from the ceiling like some nightmarish chandelier. And as Roche's mental state unraveled, his punishments grew increasingly horrifying. Fast forward to 1979, when Roche predicted the apocalypse was imminent. Naturally, he relocated the Ant Hill Kids to the remote Quebec wilderness to ride out the end of days. Spoiler, the world did not, in fact, end. But Roche shrugged and told his followers, God's timeline is complicated. Astonishingly, they bought it and stayed. Life in the woods, however, was anything but divine. Roche ruled with an iron fist, or perhaps a sledgehammer, considering he once forced followers to break their own legs with one. Punishments included eating dead rats, burning themselves on stoves, and, in one jaw-dropping case, nailing children to trees for other kids to pelt with stones. If you think it can't get worse, think again. One of Roque's followers, Solange Boillard, complained of stomach pain. Roche, ever the wannabe surgeon, decided to operate. Armed with kitchen tools and a blowtorch, he removed part of her intestines in a procedure that would make even horror movie fans wince. Unsurprisingly, Solange didn't survive. But Roche wasn't done. He drilled a hole in her skull in a bizarre resurrection attempt. Shocker. It didn't work. Even after this macabre spectacle, the group remained loyal. Enter Gabrielle Lavallée, the unsung hero of this nightmare. Gabrielle endured years of abuse, including having her teeth pulled out and her arm amputated by Roche with a hunting knife. That last act was her breaking point. She escaped and alerted authorities, finally pulling back the curtain on Roche's reign of terror. In 1989, the police stormed the commune, arrested Roche, and rescued the remaining followers. By 1993, Roche was sentenced to life for murder and other atrocities. But karma wasn't finished. In 2011, his cellmate, fed up with Roque's antics, murdered him in prison, leaving his body mutilated as a final act of poetic justice. Despite his gruesome end, some followers stayed loyal, visiting his grave and clinging to his twisted teachings. For the rest of us, Roche's story is a grim reminder of the deadly combination of blind faith and unchecked power. Here's a chilling story that sounds like it could be ripped from a horror movie, but this happened in real life, in one of the UK's most secure prisons. Let me set the scene. It's October 1st, 2011, and we're at Franklin Prison, a fortress of a facility housing some of the most dangerous criminals in Britain. Among them was Mitchell Harrison, a 23-year-old with a record so dark it could blot out the sun. Harrison was serving an indefinite sentence after luring a 13-year-old girl to his apartment and committing horrific crimes that landed him on every judge's significant risk list. But while his crimes shocked the public, what happened to him behind bars left even hardened prison guards speechless. Enter Nathan Mann, 24, and Michael Parr, 33, two walking nightmares in human form. Mann, a violent fantasist serving life for the brutal double murder of elderly women in a nursing home, had confessed to dreaming up the goriest killings imaginable. Oh, and just to make things worse, he had a cannibalism fixation. Lovely. Parr wasn't much better. He was doing time for attempting to suffocate a hospital patient back in 2003. Bonded by their shared taste for violence, these two formed a diabolical duo that would make villains in horror films seem tame. On that fateful October morning, Mann and Parr hatched a plan that was as brutal as it was bizarre. They lured Harrison into Mann's cell, where the true horror began. Parr held Harrison down while Mann wielded makeshift weapons, a razor blade melted into plastic, and, because why not, a pen. It was quick, vicious, and deeply disturbing. They planned to remove Harrison's liver and eat it. Yes, you heard that right. But, for reasons known only to them, they didn't go through with their gruesome culinary aspirations. By the time prison guards discovered Harrison's lifeless body, it was far too late. The injuries were so horrifying that even seasoned staff were visibly shaken. And if you thought Mann and Parr would show any signs of remorse, think again. Mann casually informed a guard about the body as if he were reporting a spilled cup of coffee. Their explanation for the murder? They just felt like doing it. Chilling doesn't even begin to cover it. Of course, the aftermath of the murder raised serious questions about how such a brutal killing could happen inside one of the UK's most secure prisons. Mann and Parr were both known to be extraordinarily violent. Mann, in particular, had openly admitted to his twisted fantasies, yet here they were, left unsupervised and free to act on their sick desires. When the case went to court, the judge didn't mince words, calling the crime ghastly and gruesome. Mann and Parr were handed additional life sentences, not that they were going anywhere to begin with. The judge made it clear that society would never see them walk free again. This case isn't just a tale of horror. It's a grim reminder of the chilling indifference that some people carry and the glaring flaws in even the most secure systems. For Mitchell Harrison, justice didn't end in a courtroom. It caught up with him in the darkest, bloodiest corner of Franklin Prison. Picture it. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, July 22, 1991. An average evening in a seemingly average city, except for one tiny detail: the horrors unfolding behind the closed door of a rundown apartment. Inside, Jeffrey Dahmer, a 31-year-old factory worker with a bizarre and grotesque hobby, is about to meet his match. Enter Tracy Edwards, a man just trying to make it through the day, who stumbles into a nightmare that would make even the bravest shudder. Edwards' escape from Dahmer's clutches would expose a twisted reality that the world could hardly comprehend. And from that night on, Dahmer's name would become synonymous with evil. Now, Dahmer didn't just dabble in the whole serial killer business. No, he turned it into an art form. Between 1978 and 1991, he murdered 17 men. But forget the usual cliches of a killer lurking in the shadows. Dahmer was far more inventive, and I use that term loosely. His victims were often vulnerable individuals, many from marginalized communities, and Dahmer lured them with promises of money, drinks, or just a place to crash. Then came the gruesome acts: dismembering bodies, collecting souvenirs like skulls, hearts, and, oh yeah, eating them. That's right. He wasn't just a Milwaukee cannibal for nothing. Born in 1960, Dahmer seemed like a regular kid at first, but things took a dark turn after his surgery at age 4. Suddenly, Jeffrey went from cheerful to quiet and oddly distant. By his teenage years, he swapped his baseball cards for dead animals, collecting bones and preserving carcasses like he was auditioning for a twisted version of National Geographic. In 1978, fresh out of high school, Dahmer took his first victim, Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker he picked up and brought home. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer had other plans. He struck him with a dumbbell and strangled him. Then, in what was the first of many, he dismembered the body and scattered the remains in the woods. 8 years passed before Dahmer killed again, but when he did, he didn't hold back. From 1987 to 1991, Dahmer went full throttle on his killing spree. He targeted young men, often meeting them at gay bars or bus stops, preying on those whose disappearances would go unnoticed. Once he lured them to his apartment, the real horror began: drugging, strangling, dismembering, and even drilling holes into their skulls to create zombies. Spoiler alert, that didn't work. Oh, and the cannibalism? Just a side dish to the horror buffet. Then came the fateful night in July 1991. Tracy Edwards managed to escape Dahmer's apartment, still in shock from the close call of nearly being handcuffed to a pole. In his panic, he flagged down police, and when they searched Dahmer's apartment, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare. Dismembered bodies, photos of victims at various stages of death, a human skull in the fridge, and body parts in the freezer. Dahmer was arrested on the spot, and as the weeks passed, he openly confessed to killing 17 people, giving details that made the world gasp. Wisconsin doesn't have the death penalty, so in 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to 15 life terms, later bumped to 16. Despite expressing a desire to die, Dahmer would spend the rest of his days behind bars. But even in prison, Dahmer couldn't resist being, well, Dahmer. He joked about his crimes, molded his food into body parts, and generally freaked out anyone who crossed his path. Predictably, he didn't win any popularity contests. On November 28, 1994, while on cleaning duty with 2 other inmates, Dahmer met his end. Christopher Scarver, armed with a metal bar, beat him to death in a fit of rage. Many believe the guards knew exactly what was about to happen and turned a blind eye. Dahmer's death sparked mixed reactions. Some saw it as poetic justice, while others, including the families of his victims, wrestled with more complicated feelings. And so, the reign of the Milwaukee cannibal ended, but the name Jeffrey Dahmer will forever be etched in history as one of the darkest figures in true crime.